wanted to discuss what I used to eat in a day. It's a very fun trend to talk about what I eat in a day, what I ate in a day kind of thing. And we typically are talking about what we eat currently, what we're eating as of lately. And I really wanted to take some time to talk about what I used to eat in a given day prior to getting sick with Lyme disease. Because a lot of what I used to eat on a daily basis was essentially setting me up to get sick, not only for Lyme, but for all of these other diagnoses and symptoms that I had going on. And I don't talk about that enough. And so, I think that if people could hear me discuss what I used to eat, maybe at least you could take something away from like, oh, I kind of tend to do that. Maybe I need to shift my focus on my nutrition a little bit. And I've taken so many valuable lessons away from what I used to eat. And I think we all can. And nutrition does grow, and it kind of grows based on like what our needs are at life in that point in time. Also our knowledge, as our knowledge expands, it changes. And a lot of nutrition truly is trial and error, figuring out how your body feels eating one way and then realizing that may not work. So you're going to shift to something else. And I've tried so many different ways of eating. And so, when people say, oh, that's not going to last, or, you only feel that way because you just started eating that way. It's like, no, I've tried so many other ways of eating. And this has been the eating, fruit-based and just, again, lots of living foods has really been the most consistent my weight and my health has been for a very long time. So I have, and not that I'm very old, but at least in a 15-year time span, I can really look at what has been the best and what has worked the best. So yeah, let's talk about what I used to eat in a day. So this probably would have been 5-6 years ago, and years leading up to that. I would pretty much eat the same for a period for, a few years. And I would wake up and I would start my day with a cup of coffee, a cup of black coffee. I would put some raw honey in that, thinking I was doing something good. I was I was defeating the purpose of the raw honey by having it in a black coffee. And I would drink my coffee while I wake up in the morning, or I would wake up in the morning in hopes to have a bowel movement. I really started drinking coffee in college to help me go to the bathroom because I wasn't having consistent bowel movements. And if you've ever been constipated, you know how uncomfortable that is. So that was really what kind of got me into caffeine. And so I started drinking coffee. So I'd start my day with coffee, and then I would not eat breakfast. And I would then have some pre-workout. My pre-workout of choice was Vega pre-workout. I thought it was healthier than the other pre-workouts. And in some ways it was. It had less bad stuff in it, but it still had a lot of bad stuff, and it had a lot of caffeine as well. So I started my day with caffeine. I had a bigger boost of caffeine, and then I would go to the gym and lift weights. I would spend about 2 hours at the gym. This was also a period of time where I overtrained my body quite a bit, which was also not good. And so I would go to the gym. I would usually do 20 minutes of cardio to get going. I would do weights, and then I would end with about 10 minutes of cardio, maybe 20, depending on the day. And then I would come home from the gym. I would have a protein shake. For a period, it was whey protein, and then I kind of switched to like a pea protein powder, but regardless, I'd have some type of protein shake. And then maybe an hour or two after that, I would have an apple with a generous amount of almond butter, just one apple, which I look back and laugh. And that, I guess you could say, was like my lunch. I didn't really count it as my lunch. I just counted it as a snack, but it really, in a way, was my lunch. And then about an hour after that, I would have a cold brew coffee. I loved cold brew coffee, and cold brew coffee is very, very strong coffee. So then here I am coming in with more caffeine. And then usually an hour or two after that, I would drink a Celsius. And that's like also an energy drink if you're not familiar with it. They're supposed to be like healthier than Red Bull, though they're also not good for you. And then I would go take a SoulCycle class in the evening, and that was kind of my second workout of the day. And I would come home, I'd have another protein shake, and then I would make myself dinner, which was really like the one true meal a day that I would eat. And it would be usually grass-fed ground bison. I was eating meat at the time, and I would definitely eat a high-quality meat. And so I would cook that with some spices, and then I would usually roast either some asparagus or some sweet potatoes with coconut oil and spices. And then I would combine all of that with some spring mix, some leafy greens. And I would use the extra coconut oil from roasting the veggies and pour that all on top, kind of like a sauce. And that's what I'd eat. And if it was summertime, I maybe would eat some watermelon after dinner. If it wasn't, then I wouldn't really eat anything. And I just think back and I'm like, oh my gosh, first of all, so much caffeine, like an insane amount of caffeine, that no wonder my adrenal glands were completely shot when I started getting all of these symptoms. That makes so much sense. And then two, my diet was primarily fats. And you might look at that and say, well, no, you had a lot of protein in your diet. Yeah, but all protein sources are also fat. Every protein source, whether it's plant-based or animal-based, is also a fat. And I take that back, not all, because, there's a good amount of protein in potatoes and fruits, and those aren't really an overt fat source. But for the most part, all sole protein sources, and that's probably a better way of putting it, all sole protein sources, like a food that you would basically deem as this is protein because it's primarily protein, those are also pretty high in fat. So if you have bison, which bison does tend to be a leaner meat, which is why I picked it, that's going to have less fat than if you were to do like chicken thighs or, a fattier beef. But its second most makeup is going to be fats. And then, lastly, of course, there's some carbs in there. But I was really eating a very, very low carb diet. And this worked for a very short period of time. I would say I got very, very cut. I have pictures and I look back, and I definitely had a six-pack, and I do still have a six-pack. It's not as bulging per se, because I can flex and you can see them. This was a little bit different. I didn't always have to flex and you could still mostly see them. The reason that happened is because I was dehydrating my body with all of the caffeine that I was consuming, and the only food I was consuming essentially was dehydrating cooked foods. And even if it wasn't cooked, like the almond butter, that's still dehydrating because it's a primary fat source, and fats are dehydrating to the body. And so I look back and there was no hydration coming in. Yeah, I would drink about a liter or two of water a day, maybe more than that. But still, there was no living water. I wasn't consuming any living water. Fresh juice is alive. You're taking a piece of fruit that is living food and you're juicing it. And that is a totally different hydration source than plain water. You could go to a river and scoop up some water, and that would probably be the equivalent of having juice because the water is moving, it is alive, there is living bacteria in there, some of it beneficial, some of it not, so you would probably still filter that. But I had none of that in my diet. The only fruit I was consuming was one apple a day and maybe watermelon in the summertime. And even then, constantly growing up, I loved watermelon. I loved it. I would eat so much of it in the summer. I would fill up on it. But then my mom would always say, well, you don't want to eat too much. That's going to cause you to gain weight. And so, of course, then you start to associate fruit things with weight gain, especially because they're a carb. And then, it gets drilled, especially in girls' heads, that carbs cause weight gain. And that's all I was really having in my diet. And it was so sad. And if I were to take pictures of everything and compile it and then compare it to pictures of everything I'm eating now, it would just look so sad and drab. And so hydration is very important. And hydration is also important for longevity and everything, for staying healthy. And if your body is dehydrated, you can't fight off anything because you're just, again, what I call being shriveled up like a raisin. I call it the raisin effect. If you are a part of my private community, there is and was a module where I talk about chronic dehydration, and I talk about this raisin effect. And it's funny because a lot of people who are very much into the fitness side of things and the fitness industry, which I was very much in that as well at one point, you know, it is all about protein, and you can't possibly fathom any other way to reach the goals that you have without the protein. And the reality is you can, it's just going to look a little different. You aren't going to look like your skin is saran wrapped to your muscle, which looking back, I'm like, that's not a good look. I don't want to look like that. I want my skin to look glowing and look elastic and healthy and be able to see, yeah, I have muscle tone, but I'm not like, you know, no, everything's not shrunken in. And so I definitely learned so much from comparing what I ate then to what I eat now. And it's just a great lesson for all of us to, you know, realize if we have any unhealthy habits, it's not too late to change them. And the possibilities are endless for how good you can feel. Because so many things that I feel now, I never thought that I would feel eating any other way. And I'm sure the thing that's going through your mind is, well, if you're not eating that much protein, then like, how are you able to work out? And you are. And there's another video that I talk about protein, and you should go watch that. But you can absolutely reach your fitness goals without worrying about eating high protein. And that is a huge moral of the story that I've taken away, and I hope you do too. I went from being very protein focused to now being not protein focused at all, and I am just as strong, if not stronger in some aspects than I used to be. And also that, mind you, this is like me now has been through having Lyme disease where I lost all of my strength, having been on antibiotics for 10 months plus antifungal medications, which are harsh on the body. So are antibiotics, but being on both and then having to recover from that and then get back into fitness. Again, the fact that I'm just as strong and if not stronger in some ways than I was prior to all that is huge for me. And for me, that's all the evidence that I need. And the other thing worth pointing out as well is when you stop taking pre-workout, which is hard. Like if you're taking a pre-workout and you decide you're gonna cut it out and not have it anymore, I will forewarn you, your workouts are gonna suck for a while. They're going to suck. I used to even take pre-workout before I would go out and go for like a 5-6 mile run, and like I would be feeling great and pumped, you know? And if you take pre-workout, you know that feeling. And I felt so weak for a long time and so slow for a long time that it was like, am I still dealing with Lyme disease symptoms? Like I shouldn't be, and I wasn't. I was dealing with the fatigue of having to train my body to work out using its own fuel and its own energy without relying on a stimulant to fuel me. And so then when I look back to what my strength used to be prior to getting Lyme disease, I also wonder how accurate was that strength? I was being fueled by a stimulant. Was I really that strong, or was it because I had the pre-workout in my system that allowed me to lift as heavy as I did and do some of the things that I did? Versus now I'm doing what I do from pure strength and from using the foods and the juices that I eat for fuel. And so that's a really good thing to think about. If you can only have a good workout and an effective workout, or a workout that you deem as effective by taking pre-workout, you may want to rethink your physical fitness, because it's not true physical fitness in my eyes. It's basically caffeine fitness. So that is something to think about also. So thank you for watching this video. Follow me on Instagram if you don't already. I post content there all the time, and I'll also be posting a lot more content here to YouTube. And go check out my video where I discuss protein myths.